Welcome to the Tracking Connections podcast, and thanks for listening.
We feature voices from around the world sharing stories of working intentionally with deep nature connection in ways that transform lives, families, projects, and communities. I'm Sarah.
I'm Aiden.
And I'm John.
And we are your hosts from Living Connection First. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tracking Connections. I'm Aiden, and I'm here with John, and I'm here with Joël Dubois. And Joël is a professor of world religions and cultures with expertise in India and has taught at Cal State Sacramento for 20 years. He has also been training to be a counselor for the past 7 years and is in the process of moving into counseling full-time. He is a husband and father of 2 children, one a young adult and one a junior in high school. Joël met John in 2010 and started doing Art of Mentoring in 2013 and caught fire around the idea of village building. And we're very happy to have you here today. Joël, hello.
Thank you. Thanks for that warm introduction.
Yeah, well, that's easy, Joël. It's a warm introduction you deserve. A very warm-hearted person. I just love that I met Joël in this one particular circumstance that I remember. It was a while ago. It was 2010, so that's 14 years. So Joël's free to correct me, whatever he remembers about this moment. Our friend Peter Schlensko was consulting with us at the time, and he was telling Josh Lane and Caitlin Williams and myself that it was our mandate to actually start a regular weekend series where people would have the opportunity to, kind of bathe in H. Shields' approach, Art of Mentoring approach, not just for 7 days, but he was looking, he was the one who made us start Village Talk. He was the one who made us start this weekend series as a way to reach out to people who might not be able to take 7 days off and do this intensive thing called Art of Mentoring. He wanted us to have mentoring experience with the same people over the course of 9 months, which is what we ended up doing at that Waldorf school in Santa Cruz. And there wasn't a huge response to it. There was just a handful of people, but we were committed because Peter made us do it. And we were like, okay, we'll do this. And of course, Caitlin and Josh and I had a blast, as you know, and I'm sure you did too. But there was one moment when Joël said to me, and I don't remember what weekend it was, but it was a little ways into the series. And you said, you know what? I've been really thinking about this. Have you ever thought about calling what you're doing culture repair? And I was like, Joël, that is so cool. Tell me why you're thinking that. And then you said it. And then you even went so far as to say, and, I'm not attached to that. I don't, you guys can use that term. It's not like I'm not branding it or trademarking it or anything, but I think you guys are doing culture repair. And that was actually a moment for me. I mean, honestly, it caused me to step back, from what I was doing. Because here I was thinking, well, I'm teaching people with tracking and nature. And you know what I mean? Like we're using mentoring to train naturalist skills. And you said that and it shifted my perspective, especially me knowing that, you're a university professor coming from Sacramento and that, you're looking at humanities as a topic all the time. And I think you actually raised my perspective, and I have called it culture repair many times. And every time I always say, I got that from Joël Dubois, at the Waldorf school. So your name has been heard. So now I'm glad your voice will be. What's your recollection of that moment and why did you say it?
Yeah, I love going back to that moment because it was the beginning of so many things. I was bringing my kids there, because I initially heard about your work and I was really thinking, I need something to get my kids involved in this, and it took me, I think, a few years, and a good friend of ours, Matthew, telling me, you also should take this for yourself because this is what's going to help your kids. In any case, that's what I was doing at that program. And the thing that had really gotten me to the idea of culture repair is Mark Lakeman, who, I don't know, maybe you'll interview on one of these podcasts at some point, who does, kind of urban, suburban, he calls it city repair in Portland. And I had heard about his program and I was just really loving all the community building aspects of it. But when I found out about what you were doing, it seemed like there was sort of like going to a deeper kind of root of all that, to culture, not just cities and the way urban landscapes are organized. So that's what kind of sparked the idea. But then the funny thing was, as you probably remember, when I started going to Art of Mentoring a few years later, every time we would be in a circle or a few times be in a circle and you'd mention culture repair and you'd mention my name. And I often feel like kind of put on the spot, like, oh, well, it's this Mark Lakeman thing. And it was just a thought. And, and I would sort of kind of brush it off. And that happened, I think, several years in a row, like 3 or 4 times. And, initially I was like, why does John keep bringing this up? It's so embarrassing. And then I finally kind of got it like, oh, well, maybe there's actually something in it for me, kind of like how I'd wanted to do this for my kids. And then I found it. So it was a similar thing. And then especially that art of mentoring, I think the first art of mentoring, there was a moment there where we were talking about Paul Rayfield's cycle of life and the different things and the different life stages associated with the eight shields. And you came to sort of my stage of life, the Northwest time, 45 to 55. And the descriptor for that time was the person in this stage of life is radiating competence and attracting the young. And my heart just sank, because I felt like that is the last thing that I would, the last phrase I would use to characterize myself. I felt there was so much struggle in my life, in my university life, because I was so passionate about teaching, but I was facing so many hurdles in terms of young people's resistances to more active, engaged learning. But there was something really good about that, the way that entered me, that made me really want to look for something different. And I think that's when, about 6 months after that art of mentoring, I reached out to you and I was like, hey, I'm really struggling here. I had this wonderful vision of what could be from that experience. And then I came back to my life and I need some support. And that's when I started getting into Village Talk and doing some mentoring. And I'm not sure if I hit on the exact, that was kind of where I was in my life arc and how that term came up for me. But just wanted to kind of pause there and see what other questions you have.
So one thing I want everyone to know about Joël, okay, he's very humble, self-effacing person, but he's very talented and deeply immersed in whatever he puts himself into. And I imagine there's a story why you're that way. But you're one of the people, like we offered this class, for instance, called Awakening the Senses, which was an online class that Josh Lane and Kathleen and I worked on together. And Ruth Corey was the responder for it for a lot of the people who took it. Ruth's an elder. She's been around. She's done everything that Eight Shields has ever offered, and she's a Kumana graduate. And she's also got a master's degree in effective online education, besides many other, degrees and certifications. She's an amazing woman. And she said to me one day, "Who is this Joël guy?" And I'm like, "Oh, he's a great guy from Sacramento. I really like Joël. I consider him a friend. And, he's a wonderful guy." "Well, do you know what he's doing with Awakening the Senses?" And I'm like, "No." She says, "I've never seen anyone go so slow and deliberately through anything we've offered. And this guy, John, he is taking his time and working these exercises over and over, and he's going to places nobody else has gone before." And so, you have to know that about Joël. He's kind of like, well, he probably did that because he thought, "Oh, I'm not learning this well enough," But, you throw yourself so deeply into stuff, which I really appreciate. In that regard, you mentioned village building. Did you do some training in village building with me, Deborah, Rude, or any of us?
Yes, right. So after, I think the 2014, 15, 16 was when that was all starting. And as soon as it came out, I really latched on to your Village Builders Toolkit, the material that you were developing there, and was just fascinated with the idea. And of course, one of the first things that happened when I went to Art of Mentoring and then came back is I had the initial impulse of like, hey, can I just leave my life, move to Santa Cruz? I was looking for positions at UC Santa Cruz. Can I just get out of this, or what can I do to kind of, just pull myself out of this to be in a different place? And of course that was not very popular with my wife and my family. And, there was, so, and I pretty quickly realized that it also just wasn't realistic, apart from the fact that there wasn't anything obvious that I could sort of pull myself out of this and go to somewhere else. But then sort of the next question became, well, how do I apply? Because this is what you talk about in your work, right? Is sort of people bringing this home and bringing it into their worlds. So how do I actually apply this? And you helped me greatly by referring me to Barbara Scher's book, Wishcraft, and doing ROCP several years in a row, I should say, Renewal of Creative Path, several years in a row, to really get to the core of what was my vision for what I could be without, pulling myself out from the environment, the familiar environment, which I didn't really want to leave. I really liked Sacramento, and I did like teaching and still do. So that's what got my wheels turning. And I think the thing, going back to Awakening the Senses, the reason I would take so long with that, I think it was supposed to be, I don't know, maybe a 6-week course. And I just felt like each one of these weeks was something I wanted to spend a month on, is because I started to intuit that, in order to make these tools, these 8 shields tools, whether they're through Awakening the Senses in nature or village building, to make them work in my environment, I needed to really slow down and kind of get rid of this expectation of what H Shields should look like, having been to Art of Mentoring or having been to a course or been participating in a course, and just really be patient. And to see, I think you use this analogy in the Village Builders material of mulching the concrete. It takes a lot of time, especially here in suburbia, which is where I live, that it takes a while to really get to see the fruits of this kind of thing. And so the tools that I've gotten from you have really helped me do that. And I think especially realize also there's something about going back to that radiating competence and attracting the young, that life stage of the Northwest adult, that can be very disorienting for those of us who come into this work at that stage of life. Realizing that there's so many other wonderful stages that, our kids who are a lot of us are coming to this work because we want it for our kids. They have the opportunity to go through all that. But here we are at that life stage, not having had all of that experience. And so how do we kind of graft ourselves into what's evolving through H Shields, through Living Connection First, through all the programs and all the tools that are available? Again, getting rid of that expectation without feeling like, well, I'm a failure because I went through most of my life and I didn't have any of that. But how can we instead, through a kind of a turn of the imagination, say, okay, well, here I am. I'm suddenly popped into this role where I know about all these other stages that lead up to this. And I have kids that are involved, and there's young people that I see who are very active and dynamically embracing that. And so then what is my role as a Northwest village builder who hasn't, who didn't inherit all of these things that led up to it?
Yeah, I want to reflect the power in that intuition to engage with this, to take your time to really build it into a practice. Because I think one of the things that we see is such a common trend is when you do go and take part in one of these workshops and it just feels amazing to be there. And then you go home and things can feel really gray and quiet and wait, what am I doing here?
Yeah,
right. And
exactly.
It is such a different experience to sort of be practicing the quiet day-to-day routines of building things up from scratch, right? That's really what I'm hearing. And I love your reflection of the challenge of coming in when you're sort of already more than halfway around the wheel, but you don't feel like that's earned.
Right.
I'm really curious about, where you have taken that from here.
Yeah. Well, and so one of the first things I did, because I was so interested in kind of active pedagogy in the classroom and had been doing different things, one of the first things I did is I actually brought the, H Shields, the attributes of connection, to my teaching and thought about, okay, well, what if I start with the idea that rather than students coming into a classroom and that I have these certain learning goals of what they're going to, achieve or what they're going to get, what if I start with this notion of active curiosity, vitality, sort of the alertness? What if I tried to get, because, so much of what happens in the classroom is we kind of get down to the business and there's slides on a screen and people are taking notes. And it's very sort of, let's focus right away. So I started doing more of that in my classroom, just even, taking time at the beginning of class to have people. Initially, I would sort of talk them through different aspects of the gratitude, the Thanksgiving address over the course of the different classes of the semester. Eventually started doing a little bit more where they're using their bodies. But then I also really started thinking about what if my primary goal in the classroom was just to get students to actually care about the things that we're studying about world culture. And that got me to the point where I, instead of reading about, say, for example, the ancient Brahmanical fire offering traditions of ancient India, which is something I've studied in my research, instead of just reading that and trying to get them to be interested in it, what if we go out to the riverfront near my campus? I'm lucky that the campus is on a river, and have a little fire and have them write down intentions and sing a few songs about intention and put them in the fire. And then have them read the stuff and say, now that you have this experience, that's maybe very different, it's a modern experience, but you looked at this ancient stuff, what do you think? And it was really amazing to see, like, wow, they're like, now I get that, like, this is something people actually, that they might be immersed in and might want to do. And that, I never realized that these older things were something that mattered to people, right? I mean, you would think there's the most obvious thing in the world when you're teaching about culture, but there's something about the lifestyle of the modern, especially sort of state university level student, that somehow that's never entered their mind that, you could get into that state. So that was really helpful very transformative. It was a lot of work, but it was very joyful. And it led to a bunch of other that was one particular class I'm describing there. And there was other ways that I used kind of role playing and active stuff to really make that my primary goal, how to actually get students to care about something that they normally would never think to care about. That was sort of the first stage.
The side effect of that is that you're now the coolest professor at Cal State Sacramento. That sounds incredible.
Well, I have to be realistic for anyone who ever wants to attempt this, that there were many intermediate stages where I was the least cool professor because I was asking them to do probably too much outside of these, other things. So it took a while to get the balance right, but it did end up at that point of like, wow, yeah, students saying this is the funnest class I've had this semester or my whole college, and thank you. And yeah, so, and that still is happening in other ways in different classes. But, that kind of took me to the next point of really wanting to design a program for students, for entering students, especially first-year students, where they would really think about, why am I here? Because again, kind of going along with that theme of students just coming in and ready to take notes, but not thinking about what they're there. And the framework of the renewal of creative path and thinking about the shields and the different aspects of that really helped inform that. And when I started to do that, I got into a place where I wanted to create, I could do it in my own classroom, but I wanted to create a program that involved, there was more people that could reach more students. And I had an administrator who was encouraging me along the way and saying, make a proposal, and we've got these funds, da-da-da. And to cut a long story short, towards the end of that process, it all came back down to, oh, well, actually, the committee that's dispersing these funds has other priorities, and I'm really sorry. And it kind of, that experience was kind of like a wall. It made me realize, there's just a certain amount of inflexibility in the structure of the way that modern universities are structured. I'm not going to be able to get past a certain point with this kind of motion for change, which then made me think about, well, what if I wasn't in this kind of position where I was a teacher in a classroom, what would I be doing? And the answer in the middle of the night, waking up at 3 a.m. on a vacation, was like, I would be a counselor. And wow, there's a counseling program on my campus, and how would I do this in a way that, again, is sustainable, where I don't just like have to leave everything and do that, but where I can do a little bit at a time alongside of my teaching job.
Well, and I think there's a parallel as well, because I feel, when you shared that story, and I really love that reflection, Joel, like a lot of parents taking their kids to nature programs or art of mentoring is how they discover it. I didn't grow up that way, and so I don't really feel like I have what it takes, but your commitment to, deeply embodying this for yourself so that you could show up obviously led you to wanting to do more. And you did so much in the classroom as far as the structure would allow you to, right?
Yes,
like
right.
In permaculture, you have to look at what are the laws, what are the rules, right?
Right.
And then your limits are. And then, but another part of you was like, well, wait, I have to actually have an outlet for this.
Yes.
And so counseling is one, but then you mentioned earlier suburban culture repair and suburban village building. Tell us a little bit about that, because that's intriguing.
Well, and alongside of that original, back in 2014, 2015, doing Barber Share and Renewal of Creative Path, one of my goals was, how can I do stuff in the classroom and on the campus, right? Because that was my life. That's what I have to do to earn my living. But then I also wanted a community aspect of that. So how can I start developing the capacity for village building outside of that, in my community, in my neighborhood? And, Beth, who came along with me to that second art of mentoring and picked up on, who's initially sort of like, what is this thing that you're going to, leave your whole life, but then really got involved in it as well, and was really kind of lit on fire in a similar way about the importance of connecting just with neighbors, right? Just having a potluck on our street, just saying hi to people who normally, just that little extra thing that you would stop. We have a beautiful park 3 blocks from our home, and walking around and just getting to know people there. So starting to do stuff in our local neighborhood. And then through the miracle of, from going to Art of Mentoring and other kinds of programs, meeting people like Molly McBride, who was at our first culture repair, and Guy Galante, who was a coyote mentor in our area, and starting to actually find other people in Sacramento. Guy and I did some bird language programs at a local sort of Boy Scout property. So doing little things like that. And that took a long time. Again, that was sort of, because it's not my full-time thing. So sort of over the year, do it a few times. But it got to the point where I think about 5 years ago, we were able to start, we called it at that time a Kamana study group. But it became very quickly, it was clear that people didn't necessarily have time to go and do all the materials involved with Kamana, but they just wanted to get together. And we started calling it the Backyard Naturalist Club, or, our Backyard Naturalist group. And that is still going to this day. And it's the thing that's really been important, and the way that the 8 Shields framework has really helped me persist with that, because, like I said, we only do things maybe once a month. And so it's easy. It could be easy to get discouraged and think, oh, this doesn't amount to much. But the thing about the 8 Shields framework that has kept me going with it is really just always coming back to that sense of, okay, there's a time and a place for everything. And everybody's got little different rhythms to their lives. And everybody's got things that stand in the way of potentially getting together even just once a month and doing things like going out to the River Parkway and, doing a stick drag and following a stick and trying to find the track, all those little things. People have so many obstacles in the way, but how can I keep tuning into, whenever I'm with a small group of people, the needs of those people and the synergy of what's actually possible given people's different situations? Where is it? As soon as there's a thread of connection, how can I build on that individually with one person at a time and then with a small group? And that has been the thing that has kept me going with the explicitly nature connection groups, but also starting other ways to get together with neighbors through other organizations where I can kind of, even though we're not doing nature connection, building the sort of sense of getting to know each other and listening, all of those attributes come into the work that I'm doing with that. So, and that's one of the things in becoming a counselor. I'll definitely be doing that more part-time when I retire. And I think I want to put more and more emphasis into be able to do neighborhood, community, village building, even if most of the people don't really think of it as that, to be able to have the energy to do that and to build on those synergies. People want this stuff.
They do indeed. And this is where you and Aiden have a lot in common, because you're not trying to teach them 8 Shields. You're just trying to build community. Yeah. You're just trying to build connection. You're not trying to teach them about the model.
Right.
It's just using the model to get a result, right. Which is the same thing that Aiden, you spoke about in your podcast about music. You just want people to fall in love with music. I'm not going to try to teach them about the directions and about the archetypes and all that. I'm just going to use that and recognize where I have the opportunity. Wonder if you have a reflection for Joël on that.
You said it well. It resonates really clearly with me. And I think the thing that I keep coming back to, or that keeps coming back up for me, is that idea now that you are the one generating it, right? Rather than coming and seeing it generated for you, and what that's been like, what you've run into, and also what you're doing to kind of bring other people along with you, right? To be supporting you in that journey.
Yes. Well, two sides of that. One side is, has to do with my own sort of developing the skills of a counselor and finding this wonderful modality, internal family systems, which some people know as parts work, getting to know all the different, that we're not a single entity, right? We have these different voices and different aspects of ourselves. And so in a sense, I've found that has been so important for me to understand how not to let different parts of myself get in the way of any given relationship. I talked in the beginning about giving up a certain expectation of what 8 Shields should be. And in every interaction, I find there's a sense within my own body, if there's something in the way of some expectation that I need to talk to and kind of work with in order to be able to make that relationship work. And that also, even using the 8 Shields framework in terms of all the different kinds of parts within myself and all the different wounds that they carry and attributes and all that. That's a whole separate podcast that we could do if there's interest at some point. Yeah. But the reason I thought of it is because one of the things that's been most potent for connecting with people again and again, in addition to being outside, right? Being outside, being in nature, doing the things, the kinds of activities related to, the awakening the senses in nature. That's been one course that I've actually used with a small group of people. We've done it together. But the other thing is music, which comes back to here, the singing together. We just had a gathering last night using the songs of Lawrence Cole, who's got an amazing website of, multi-part songs, and he's got all the different parts, and you can play them online, and bringing that into our community, because everybody feels connected when they can participate in singing in their own way. And we've actually kind of added a reflection element to that, where, singing the songs, actually this past year, instead of doing a literal renewal of creative path, let's go through the steps of the process, we picked 3 songs that had elements of the renewal of creative path to them. And then we sang the songs, and then we paused, and everybody journaled with certain questions related to renewal of creative path, and discussed, and then brought together. And that combination of singing and reflecting, and at our friend's Molly has a wonderful house and a deck out overlooking Little Creek near the local river parkway. When we can be out in nature as well, and seeing the deer come closer when we sing, and reflect, and seeing the bird language here, and the bird plow here, and the predator over here, but the birds over here singing, and watching all of that as we sing and as we reflect. That has been, I think, one of the most magical recipes for getting people coming back to, again, they don't know it's village building, they don't think of it that way, but they feel some part of themselves nourished, and build up a network of people who we can rely on to come and to bring family members and friends sometimes.
That's a really cool story. I can just see how many levels and layers and tools of this you're working with. I mean, there's so much coming through that I could stop you on any one sentence and do a podcast on that sentence.
Yes.
You're working with a lot of facility in this, which is really fun to hear. If you look like 5 years into the future, what do you hope to see from culture repair in suburbia? Because I think it's a beautiful example that you're sharing.
I think what I'm looking forward to in the next 5 years is having more time to be able to do more of these things. And again, there's always a limit in terms of people have busy, hectic schedules, and there's the work week, the blessed work week that we all deal with, that makes everybody disappear from their homes here in the middle of the day for most of the week. But being able to do this more often, and to bring people from these different groups, like there's a neighborhood group that has nothing to do with nature connection, that's really about listening to each other's stories, kind of bringing people into each other's orbits and seeing more cross-fertilization. Because I think one of the things that the 8 Shields framework is expert at making clear is that there's so many different dimensions to this, and there's so many different groups in the world that are all already embodying some of the attributes and the different skills, even if they're not doing explicit nature connection. And of course, there's a lot of nature interest right out there, but how to just keep looking for, like, what are the synergies, what are the connections that people don't notice, that I can introduce this person to that person, and then maybe that'll make an opportunity for when we have this gathering, a new kind of person can come and tell their friends. So I think you put out the idea in one of your Village Builders modules, the idea of having a spreadsheet of different roles and over the seasons, and different kinds of ages. And I've never actually made that spreadsheet, but I think since I heard that idea, I've kind of had within me, like, okay, yes, I want to get to that spreadsheet phase, where I'm actually mapping things out. And even though nobody might even know, I mean, I do hope to actually get a few people who, would be interested in explicitly talking about this. It'd be nice to have a couple others. And I think some of the folks that I've mentioned might be a game for that. But just so that you can sort of have a map of what's happening that, is corresponds to the 8 Shields principles, but that you just, so that you can just kind of keep feeding it.
Brilliant.
It's really awesome to hear what you're doing. And this, actually, what you are describing is very much one of my major hopes for how this can spread, because, we talk about this idea of coming in and just being, brand new to nature, but there are so many people out there that are maybe several steps away from even considering ring zero, but everybody loves people. And what I love is you've created ways of connecting and ways of being together that just feels good and makes you want to come back again. And that just feels like such a core need for anything we want to create that's going to be successful in the long run, right?
Yes.
So.
And can I add one more thing? The living connection first. that the idea of having something that we can go to that involves so many connections internationally and so many different people from around the globe. But one of the most exciting things that's happened in the past couple of months is I've gotten 3 of these other people who are used to coming to these gatherings to get on Living Connection First. And so now we're like, hey, let's have we could do a Zoom gathering, but hey, we live near, but let's actually get together and like mull over the topic for the month. And I'm finding out a number of these people, I think this is probably true of a lot of the folks on the village, haven't necessarily even figured out what this natural mind journey thing is, and so kind of like taking them there. I'm really excited about natural mind journey. I told you, John, that's one of the tools that fits so well with, suburban village building, where people, you can imagine all sorts of different roles for people in a community. And that's the way the whole thing is structured. So I did want to put in a little plug for, just encouraging you to keep developing that. Not that I'm even up to the stage that you've developed it to, but just, I love that whole framework. And I'm super excited to spend the rest of my life, kind of working through it, trying to get it as close as I can to that center of the map.
Well, thankfully, there's 512 of them. So
yes,
and I think I've completed somewhere on the order of 8 times 6, 48.
48, yeah.
I'm just now into the 49th and 50th right now. So we're tagging away on it, but I think that'll keep me busy for the next few years. But I'll do my best to stay ahead of our suburban village builders. Yes. And I love your idea of, getting people from your cadre to join Living Connection First Village, and then taking what we're doing on Zoom and deepening it. That is the coolest. You have to share that story with villagers next time we're on a village gathering together. I think they'd be inspired. Yes.
And in fact, Molly was asking me yesterday, so like, are there a lot of other people, doing this where they know people near them? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. So I think this is kind of a cutting edge of, the development of that community.
Well, you're still pushing the edge of culture repair, Joël Dubois, and we're thankful for it, especially that you're working in suburbia. It's a great story for everyone to tune into. So thanks so much for spending time with us and sharing. And I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to even just crystallize all this and kind of realize what's happening, because even though I have a faint sense of it, talking to folks who understand what's going on is really encouraging and inspiring and invigorating.
And for those who might want to connect with you, Joël, how might they go about doing that?
I think at this point, since I don't have a fancy website, a good old email, my first initial last name @csus.edu, and you can put that on the website. I do have a few other links to, places that I'm associated with, so I can give those to you as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening to Tracking Connections. You can find everything related to the podcast and our current offerings at trackingconnections.net. We'll see you next time.